Poverty and inequality is worsening, and of course this was the big fear around COVID-19. At the same time, the cost of living in South Africa is rising, which of course affects the poor who spend a disproportionate amount of their income on food, for example. Stats SA recently updated the food poverty line to 624 Rand per person per month. Let's look at other key data from the September 2021 Household Affordability Index. To discuss, we're joined by Mervyn Abrahams, Program Coordinator at the Pietermaritzburg Economic Justice and Dignity Group. Thank you for being with us, Mr. Abrahams. So the concern was that the pandemic would hit and the poor would get poorer. What can you tell us? What is revealed in this report?
So good evening, and good evening to all your viewers. As you said, the expectation has come true that the poor has become much poorer and are struggling. So what we are seeing is that when we compare the increased food poverty line with levels of household income, then it shows us that the household affordability crisis has become even more entrenched, and that poverty and inequality is even more a reality of life in South Africa. And that food prices continue to increase. So for instance, our basket of food, of 44 very basic foods, for the month of September now stands at 4,219 Rand and 48 cents, which is well above the level of a national minimum wage.
And I mean, let's look at this in light of the social grant, the COVID-19 social relief grant of just 320 Rand. It becomes clear that that doesn't go very, very far at all.
No, it doesn't. It is, although we have to say that most people we interact with in the communities are very happy that that grant has been put back in place, because at least it is something rather than nothing. But it does not allow people to live at the level where they can purchase sufficient and nutritious food. So Stats SA tells us that in order to be able to purchase sufficient and nutritious food, you would require, because of the poverty line, 624 Rand per person per month. And when we look at, for instance, the 315 Rand, that is way below that. And when we look at the child support grant, which now stands at 460 Rand, then that too is only about half of what is required to buy sufficient and nutritious food.
Yeah, and often these grants are being shared across multiple people. Do we have a clear idea of how many people in South Africa, what percentage of the population is living now below the poverty line, and how many are in a dire situation where they're going to bed hungry?
So we have the stats of those who live below the poverty line, and we have something like about 55% of South African households are below the upper bound poverty line, and that is just over 1,000 Rand per person per month. And then about 25%, so a quarter of all South Africans, are living below the food poverty line, meaning that they are not able to purchase enough food to live a healthy and dignified life.
So now, what does government do? I mean, I remember in the past, our government has been lauded for the social grant system. I guess because what we're outlining here is the reality that it has kept so many people alive, but it's not enough. The coffers are running dry. The government fiscus is stretched. What are the interventions that are needed, and how can they be funded?
So essentially, we need to target our interventions better. We know that the child support grant is it's a key instrument in breaking intergenerational poverty cycles. So that is an important target, and we should at the very minimum ensure that there is sufficient money to pay for sufficient food for children. So that is step number one. And we need to, in a sense, get together what we have called a dialogue of all interested parties to begin to identify what are the priorities we want to see and the kind of South Africa we want to see in the next 20 years. So it's going to have to be an economic solution, and really it's going to have to be a debate within South Africans as to what do we support and what measures do we cut out of the budget in order to support that. But for that we need political leadership, and leadership who has a vision of what South Africa should look like in 20 years from now.
Yeah. And I mean, it's just staggering if you look at it, potentially a quarter of all South Africans going to bed hungry tonight. Thank you very much, Mervyn Abrahams, Program Coordinator at the Pietermaritzburg Economic Justice and Dignity